The manhwa begins with Sienna standing still, a mix of fear and determination in her eyes. Her dad, Jude Bowman, is in trouble, and she's ready to face whatever comes. The boss, a rough-looking man with a cold smile, says mistakes have consequences. Jude's mistake was stealing money from him, and now it's time to pay up. Sienna offers to give back all the money, hoping to avoid any violence. She tries to keep her voice steady, but Jude tells her to leave. He admits he brought this on himself and doesn't want her involved. The boss pretends to be touched by their bond, but his right-hand man interrupts, eyeing Sienna with a cruel look. The boss agrees, suggesting that maybe Sienna should pay instead. Fear fills Jude's eyes. He begs for his daughter's safety, but the boss and his men seem uninterested in mercy. The boss then gives Sienna a choice: pay her dad's debt or hand him over, threatening to break Jude's hands if she doesn't decide quickly. He gives her 3 minutes to think about it. As she tries to decide, Jude faints, and Sienna desperately tries to wake him up. The boss taunts her, saying he can't even wait 3 minutes, and that if she agrees to his terms, he will take Jude to the hospital right away. If she doesn't, they will wait and see if he makes it. As she starts to respond, someone suddenly cuts her off, telling her to hang on. A man named Mr. Wolfe arrives, and the atmosphere changes. The boss looks anxious and explains that Jude cheated in his casino and deserves to be punished. However, Mr. Wolfe has a use for Sienna and asks the boss to humor him. Mr. Wolfe offers the boss a significant deal in return for Sienna's release. The boss is more than willing to agree, saying he would happily give up a woman for such a big offer. Thankful but slightly annoyed, the boss claims he would have let Sienna go if Mr. Wolfe had asked. He then tells Sienna to serve Mr. Wolfe well and leaves with his men. As they leave, he wishes Mr. Wolfe a good day. Mr. Wolfe orders his men to take Jude to the hospital immediately. His men comply without question. Turning to Sienna, Mr. Wolfe remarks on how the once confident lawyer now seems unable to even look him in the eye. Ian Wolfe grabs her arm, and she yells at him to let go. She demands to know why he helped her. He tells her it's all about having control over her and getting even. He remembers how, last month, she had the nerve to stand against him, almost getting him into serious trouble. He thinks to himself that she's worth the effort and pain. It took him a month to plan everything. Now, he finds it awesome to have a beautiful and smart woman at his disposal. Ian Wolfe tells her to get up. She asks what he wants her to do. He says he wants her to work for him and tells her it's a deal. He warns her to do as he says, or he might hand her dad over to some dangerous people. She thinks to herself that she's never met a man as pretty and despicable as Ian in her 20-some years of life. Their paths weren't supposed to cross, but they did when she was locked in a tough battle with him. Now, he's always bossing her around and trying to humiliate her in every way possible. At the Blue Enchantress, room 398, Sienna is fully dressed. He decides to strip her of her dignity, making her take off her clothes until she's down to a one-piece outfit. She receives a threatening notification from him and tells herself he's an animal. With that thought, she opens the door. Music is playing everywhere, and she sees women publicly exposing themselves as she walks in. The atmosphere is unsettling, but she steps forward, knowing she has no choice but to face whatever comes next. She walks into the room shyly, feeling all eyes on her. She spots him sitting calmly, pointing her out to his friend who agrees. He orders the lights to dim, leaving only the chandeliers to illuminate her. There are murmurs around about her appearance. One guy tries to touch her, but his friend stops him. He walks over and instructs her to clear the bottles. As she leans forward, her chest area is accidentally exposed, making her feel ashamed. She moves towards Mr. Wolfe's table, trying to avoid his gaze, but he uses his shoe to lift her chin and demands that she look at him. One of Ian's friends questions her age. Ian raises her head and asks her to confirm she's of legal age. Before she can answer, Ian reassures his friend that she's clearly an adult. Feeling embarrassed and uncomfortable, she decides she needs to leave. As she turns to go, someone grabs her hair, stopping her. They ask where she's headed, causing her pain. She firmly tells them to let go or she'll call the police, but they laugh it off, continuing to taunt her. She's shocked that they show no fear. As a lawyer, she's been taught to respect the law, yet here she is, feeling threatened and degraded by lawbreakers. It's ironic. She turns to the person who started it all, but he remains motionless, confident she won't leave because he has leverage over her dad. Suddenly, another guy grabs her, and she pleads with him to let her go. She's still pleading when he forces her into a chair. Terrified, she realizes his intentions as he starts to unbuckle his trousers. She screams for Ian, begging him to stop his friend. Ian finally intervenes, pulling his friend away as she trembles in fear. His friend questions Ian's actions, but Ian ignores him, lifting her up and declaring he's changed his mind. His friend becomes angry and tries to follow, but someone blocks him and advises him to let it go. She pleads with Ian to take her away, knowing he might be her only hope. Ian considers it, but warns her about the implications of asking a man to intervene in that way. She hesitates, frozen by his words. Ian smirks and leaves the room. One of them questions Ian's intentions with the girl, wondering if she's merely being displayed. Another speculates Ian might use her for a business deal. They discuss Ian's preferences, and one expresses frustration over not being able to take advantage of her. Mr. Wolfe drives her to his house and escorts her inside, instructing a maid to take her to his room. The maid tries to assist, but Sienna insists she can manage alone. The maid insists she's following Mr. Wolfe's orders, leading to a confrontation where Sienna locks the door. The maid attempts to undress her, threatening to call Mr. Wolfe if she resists. Sienna reluctantly lets the maid proceed, feeling conflicted and surreal about the situation. In a flashback, after graduating from Amityville Law School with top honors, her first trial proved to be life-changing. It was a case pitting workers against the wealthy capitalists of Wolfe Group. Following an accident caused by negligence at one of Wolfe Group's construction sites, resulting in several casualties, the workers couldn't afford an experienced lawyer. Despite her status as a fresh graduate, she bravely offered to take on their case for free. She was young and underestimated by many, but her self-confidence was unwavering. To everyone's surprise, including Wolfe Group, she excelled in the courtroom. Her legal skills led to a stunning victory for the workers, dealing a significant blow to Wolfe Group's business operations. Presently, she believed it was just a legal dispute between two sides, unaware of what would follow. Lost in her thoughts, she starts to question herself, but shakes off the doubts. The maid's voice breaks her reverie, bringing her back to the present moment. The maid pours some soap into her hands and gently massages Sienna's body. After the shower, Sienna goes to Ian's room. He gestures for her to come closer and comments on how different she is now compared to when she begged him to help her earlier. She responds, blaming him for the situation. Ian questions her about her change of heart, and abruptly removes her towel. Sienna reacts with shock and anger, but Ian pushes her onto the bed. He touches her inappropriately with a scornful expression. Ian's actions leave Sienna feeling confused and uncomfortable. She wonders about his true intentions. Why bring her here if he doesn't want her? Despite his aggression, there's an unsettling tension between them. Sienna demands to know what Ian wants, but he responds harshly, biting her neck until it hurts. He chastises her for being ungrateful and threatens to send her back to where she came from. She tries to speak, but he silences her with a command. He warns her not to provoke him again, emphasizing the consequences. Then, he instructs her to turn over, continuing to kiss her. As he does, he notices a scar on her back, a blemish on an otherwise flawless body. He questions her about it, and she explains that Lena was responsible. He abruptly leaves the room. Lena pleads with Mr. Wolfe for another chance, apologizing for her mistake. He rebukes her sharply, reminding her of their strict rules and their earlier conversation. Lena acknowledges his warning and leaves, knowing the consequences of pushing him further. She has been working for Mr. Wolfe for 2 years and understands his temperament well. Gratefully, she thanks him and says goodbye. Alone now, she reflects on his unpredictable behavior, feeling she needs to escape his dangerous influence. Hearing the door open, pretends to be asleep, hoping to avoid any further confrontation. He returns to the room and finds Sienna asleep. Deciding to sleep as well, she wakes later to find him kissing her. She questions his intentions, but he responds casually. She asks about his work, realizing it's the weekend. Regretting not leaving while he slept, she thinks to herself. He tells her to stop playing games, but she refuses and he grabs her hand. She begs him to go easy on her, but he insists on his desires. He warns her not to move, threatening to take things further in the living room if she does. She complies and he praises her, kissing her. Just as he's about to continue, the phone rings, interrupting them. Frustrated, he answers the call from Charlie, asking what's going on. That gentle look in his eyes comforts her briefly. "Don't be afraid, I'm coming over," he tells her before getting dressed. She hides under the covers and falls asleep as he leaves. Later, the maid interrupts her sleep, telling her Mr. Wolfe wants her right away. They remove the covers, and she protests angrily. They insist she hurry, saying Mr. Wolfe doesn't like waiting. They help her shower and dress, commenting on her appearance. There's a car waiting for her outside. She asks where they are taking her, but the driver remains silent. Arriving at Oasis Medical Center, she recalls having anonymously donated bone marrow here once before. She crumples the papers, determined to negotiate with Mr. Wolfe about donating her blood. She sees it as a chance to use her rare blood type, known to only a few in the city, as leverage. They are negotiating, and he tells her she can't ask for anything. She mentions helping his dad in return for using her blood to save someone, believing it's a fair trade. He plays a recording of her dad pleading for mercy, which shocks her. She demands to know what happened to her dad, and he responds angrily. His wound wasn't healing properly, so he instructed the doctor to clean it with saline and antiseptic. She's upset because he had already been treated, asking why he removed the dressing and suggesting iodine could have been used instead. She calls his actions heartless, and he responds by asserting his authority and warning her not to challenge him again. Finally, he hands her a pen. He suggests listening to the recording again to help her decide. She takes the pen and signs the contract. The nurse enters to draw her blood, remarking on her strength. They leave in the car, and she asks if she can go home. He hints they have unfinished business from earlier. She turns away silently. He playfully asks if the cat got her tongue. She looks away again. Unhappy with her response, he grabs her hand. She says she doesn't feel well because of his scent. As soon as they arrive home, Sienna starts vomiting. Ian wonders if she finds him disgusting. He calls her over and pulls her close, but she continues vomiting, even on him. Ian screams in frustration, pushes her away, and storms off. Shortly after, she passes out. The doctor explains she has low blood sugar from not eating enough. He suggests rest and some food will help her. When she wakes up, she asks how long she's been asleep, but he tells her to be quiet. The maid enters with food and encourages her to eat. Sienna mentions it's female ginseng, but Ian asks if she doesn't like it and tells her to finish the soup. Reluctantly, she gulps it down. The maids finish dressing her, and Ian walks in, making her wonder what's next. He remarks positively about the evening ahead, and hands her something to sign. She hesitates, feeling unwell and suggesting they postpone, but he interrupts sternly. He emphasizes that he doesn't tolerate incompetence, and demands money or usefulness from her. He dismisses her concerns and starts to unzip her dress, despite her protests. Reminding her of her role to serve him, he continues his demands. He notices another scar. She worries if he'll dismiss her like he did with others before. She explains she got the scar from donating bone marrow, reassuring him it wasn't from her being careless. He comments on her complexity, which she denies. He then orders her to secure Mr. Leonard's signature that night, threatening her father's well-being if she fails. Frustrated by his constant threats, she feels helpless, knowing he's using her father's condition against her. After a tense exchange, he turns and leaves the room, leaving her to process the situation. Sienna realizes there's no escape, and decides to be smart about the situation. She walks directly to Mr. Leonard's table, and confidently asks the ladies around him to leave. One of them complains, but Mr. Leonard dismisses them. Once they are alone, he asks her name, and she introduces herself as a lawyer. Mr. Leonard wonders what Ian Wolfe is planning. Sienna explains that she has thoroughly reviewed the contract and everything is in order. She then asks him to sign on the dotted line, hoping to complete her task swiftly. Mr. Leonard quickly realizes that Ian Wolfe sent Sienna. She calmly explains that, as a lawyer, her job is to interpret the law, and that Wolfe sent her to finalize the business. Mr. Leonard ponders her presence, wondering if it's a warning from Wolfe. Sienna remains composed, knowing that completing this task is crucial for her father's safety. Sienna pushes the contract toward Mr. Leonard, emphasizing that it's a fair deal and hinting that delays could result in a price change. Mr. Leonard reflects on his past, acknowledging the questionable actions he's taken to climb the ladder. He senses Wolfe's warning but tries to calm himself. As he begins to speak, uncertainty flickers in his eyes. Sienna can tell Mr. Leonard is looking for any weakness in her argument, so she keeps her composure. He agrees it's a good deal and pours wine for both of them. She eyes the wine cautiously. Mr. Leonard invites her to sit, recognizing her from the Wolfe Group's recent lawsuit loss. Sienna feels a small surge of confidence, but remains firm. She informs him that she will leave in 20 minutes, making it clear that if he doesn't sign, she can easily find someone else to finalize the deal. Mr. Leonard cuts her off, agreeing to sign without further delay. He trusts her word and accepts the offer, signing the contract. Sienna acknowledges his wise choice, emphasizing Mr. Wolfe's confidence in the project and its mutual benefits. Meanwhile, Ian Wolfe watches the interaction through a hidden camera, remarking to himself about Mr. Leonard's confidence in his own territory. As Sienna steps out, she runs into Trevan Sloane, who grabs her hair and demands to know where she thinks she's going. She tries to protest, but he hits her. Mr. Leonard intervenes, telling Sloane not to be so rough on the lawyer. Sloane, mocking her profession, sneers at her. Furious, Sienna thinks to herself what a jerk he is and then asserts herself, hitting him back and declaring that she's Ian Wolfe's woman. Sienna knows Leonard can't find out about her situation. If he learns she's just Ian's plaything, she'll be humiliated by both men. She tells herself she has to stay strong and lose the defiant attitude. Sloane taunts her, still angry about being hit. He vows to make her pay. Trying to maintain her composure, Sienna challenges Sloane's assumption, asking if he really thinks Ian would trust a mere plaything to handle important negotiations with Leonard. She then turns to Leonard, seeking his opinion, hoping to reinforce her position. Sienna knows it's a trap. The Wolfe Group suffered a significant loss in court, and Leonard is an investor Ian is trying to win over. Sloane, thinking to himself, realizes that exposing her could upset Leonard. He tries to belittle her, claiming she's just a gift from Ian to Leonard. Sienna laughs, challenging his words. She asks if Ian told him that or if he overheard their private conversations. She mentions how Ian recently fired a longtime employee because of her, subtly planting seeds of doubt in Sloane's mind. She doesn't care if he's Ian's right-hand man, she's determined to turn them against each other. Ian realizes Sienna's tactfulness has surprised him. He suspects a spy if Sloane knows why Lena was fired, otherwise, Sloane is just being difficult. Ian orders Sloane to leave, and his guard complies. Turning to Leonard, Ian engages in conversation, knowing Leonard is keeping him in check. Sienna, observing from afar, recognizes Ian's calculated approach to dealing with Leonard. She managed to get herself out of trouble, and Ian seems impressed by her cunning. He asks if she has anything to say, but she stands her ground, reminding him that she did exactly what he had asked for. Ian, still holding the recording of her father's distressed voice, uses it to try to intimidate her. She calls him a sociopath, but he counters, accusing her of being the one at fault. Ian then gives her one last chance to respond carefully. Tearfully, she pleads for him to release her father from whatever threat he's under. Ian, unmoved by her tears, scoffs at her, suggesting she is only pretending to be submissive now after her earlier defiance. She challenges him, asking if he would have preferred that something worse had happened to her. His reaction is dismissive. He stands up abruptly, seemingly done with the conversation. She staggers slightly when Ian shoves her away, wondering if he's insulting her. Collecting herself, she reflects on her journey from tough times to finally landing a decent job after college. She wanted respect, not to be treated like a doormat. When Ian questions her about what she did wrong, she internally wishes she could retaliate against him. Reluctantly, she agrees to comply with his demands, but asserts herself, reminding him to stay in his place. Ian tries to silence her by touching her lips, but she surprises him by biting his finger. Quickly realizing her action, she sucks on his finger instead, trying to avoid further conflict. Ian, amused by her quick thinking, withdraws his hand, acknowledging her cunning. Sienna apologized as Ian washed his hands. She pleaded with Ian to spare her father, offering herself instead. Ian commented on her sudden change in demeanor before someone knocked on the door. "Mr. Wolfe, the perfumer is here," the person announced. Ian allowed Sienna to join the perfumer, promising her a chance to see her father afterward. The perfumer presented different scents, describing their top notes and inviting Ian to test them. Sienna was unsure about perfumes, but tried to make a decision. She thought about how she might not be helpful, feeling like an outsider in this world. Ian, on the other hand, realized he might have been mistaken about something. When Ian asked if any of the scents bothered her, Sienna remembered how one scent reminded her of unpleasant places. She clarified that it wasn't the perfume itself, but rather the association she made. Despite her uncertainty, she said she liked all the scents. Ian instructed her to choose one, and she picked her favorite. The perfumer expressed happiness with her choice and left, looking forward to serving Ian again. Sienna hesitates as Ian sprays perfume behind her ear and sniffs it. She protests when he squeezes her ear, but he presses on, biting her. She retorts that nobody is perfect, grateful for her flaws which protect her from harsher treatment. Later, she visits her dad in the hospital. He notices her scent and spots a scar on her neck, questioning why she's there. She reassures him and asks him not to move. Sienna asks her dad how he's holding up, and what the doctors have done to him. Her dad explains that Ian Wolfe is covering his medical expenses, mentioning they wanted to treat his onychomycosis. He refused additional treatments, but the doctor insisted on removing the infected nail despite his resistance to local anesthesia. He tearfully recalls the painful procedure of having his nail ripped from the nail bed. Sienna thinks to herself that Ian is a sociopath and feels deep sympathy for what her dad has endured. She apologizes to him and expresses gratitude for his sacrifices. Her dad mentions her mom leaving them for money, but Sienna defends her dad's efforts to protect her. She recalls studying hard with the hope of making a difference in the world through the law. Sienna believes in the fairness of the law and hopes to use her knowledge to secure justice for her dad and herself. Sienna assures her dad that she's fine despite everything. A nurse interrupts, summoning Sienna to VIP room 1308. As she enters, she finds a lady waiting for her. They exchange introductions and the lady offers her coffee or tea, to which Sienna responds with gratitude and takes a seat. Sienna listens as the lady thanks her for saving her life with a blood donation. The lady apologizes for the wait and offers coffee or tea, which Sienna politely declines, explaining they keep her awake at night. Sienna realizes this lady must be the one Ian cares deeply about. Sienna listens as Carly explains Ian doesn't know about their meeting and expresses gratitude for Sienna's help. Sienna reassures her it's okay. She realizes Ian keeps Carly protected because he cares deeply for her. Carly introduces herself and offers future help if needed. Sienna thanks her and prepares to leave, but Carly insists on giving her a lip balm and chocolates as a gift. Reluctantly, Sienna accepts and then departs. After Sienna leaves, a man emerges and remarks that Sienna is more capable than previous individuals. Charlie admires Sienna's beauty and praises her confidence in standing up to Ian. He expresses concern about Ian developing feelings for her. Carly reflects on her own efforts over the past 3 years to win Ian's love without success. She believes Sienna won't succeed either because Ian's treatment of her is based on saving his mother in the past. Charlie urges Carly to assert herself, pointing out Ian's deep care for her and suggesting she could ask him for anything. Carly sees through Charlie's attempt to manipulate Ian against Sienna and calls him out on it. Charlie nervously laughs off her accusation, but expresses his discomfort with Sienna being close to Ian. Carly dismisses him, telling him to consider her words, and Charlie eventually leaves after commenting on the difference between their beverages. She approaches the tea set and accidentally knocks over a cup, causing it to break. A nurse enters and asks if everything is all right. Carly apologizes and explains what happened. The nurse reassures her and offers to clean up the mess. And thinks to herself that it's rare to find someone from a wealthy background who is so easygoing. She watches as the nurse cleans up the broken cup. Sienna greets the morning as she returns to work. Behind her, 2 men discuss some news. The Wolfe Group has won a bidding for suburban land and will develop it with Spiker Bridge, expecting to earn big money. Sienna overhears that Leonard owns Spiker Bridge and feels uneasy about the partnership. The men mention they'll soon be looking for a general counsel for the new venture. Her phone rings with an unfamiliar number. Suspicious, she answers, but the caller abruptly tells her to go to the in-house legal department for a handover. Sienna wonders who could be behind the call and heads to the legal department as instructed. Sienna thinks to herself that she should have guessed Ian was behind the strange call. At work, she asks if it can wait, but Ian insists she come immediately. She agrees and heads over. In the legal department, Mr. Goodwin praises Sienna's professionalism and expresses excitement about working together. Sienna reflects on how Mr. Goodwin used to be adversarial towards her in the past. She credits her mental toughness and legal knowledge for winning cases despite challenges. Finally, she shakes hands with Mr. Goodwin, accepting his olive branch. Mr. Goodwin compliments Sienna's legal prowess, acknowledging she's a capable lawyer. He hands her a file, eager to start working together. Sienna is about to examine it when he suggests lunch instead. She hesitates, knowing she should check the information now, but agrees to go to the cafeteria with him. During lunch, Mr. Goodwin mentions a welcome lunch arranged by his staff. Sienna worries about delaying the file review, but decides to open it afterward. Upon inspection, she confirms everything looks good. Mr. Goodwin, impressed by Sienna's dedication compared to his team, acknowledges the reasons behind their previous loss in a case. Sienna accepts his compliment graciously and affirms the reputation of his team as the Wolfe Group's top performers, causing her to stand up abruptly, accidentally knocking over his glass of tea. Apologizing profusely, he offers her a tissue to clean up the spill. She assures him it's not a big deal, but mentions she has a client meeting later. He suggests they go to the laundry room, where she can change into spare clothes while her outfit is washed. Grateful for the solution, she quickly changes and gets ready for her afternoon appointment. After finishing their meal, Miss Bowman answers a phone call, smiling as she listens and agrees to meet someone in half an hour. She hurries outside and flags down a taxi, telling the driver where to go. While in the cab, she notices the slider on her clutch is not closed properly. Concerned, she wonders if someone might have opened it and checks inside to make sure everything is okay. Sienna carefully opens her clutch and takes out the important document she needs, only to realize a crucial page is missing. Panicking slightly, she tries to call Mr. Goodwin immediately, but his line is busy each time she tries. Frustrated, she ponders her next steps when suddenly her phone rings again. It's Sarah Galloway confirming their meeting shortly. Sienna reassures Sarah she's on her way and ends the call, her mind racing with thoughts on how to handle the missing document. Realizing the issue with the document will have to wait, Sienna sighs to herself. Sarah informs her their meeting is concluding for the day. Sienna acknowledges and bids farewell, looking forward to their next meeting. Sienna tries to call Goodwin again, but his phone remains unreachable. Frustrated, she decides she'll have to visit his office in person. Just as she's about to leave, her phone rings. It's Ian calling. She answers, and Ian immediately demands her presence in his office within 15 minutes, threatening consequences if she's late. Sienna tries to reason with him, but Ian hangs up abruptly. Angry at his behavior, Sienna vents her frustration aloud, wishing Ian had been more courteous in his request. Sienna rushes into Ian's office, out of breath from the rush to get there. She explains that it took a while to find a cab, causing the delay. Ian gives her a doubtful look, questioning if she expects him to believe her excuse. Sienna stands her ground, insisting that he should believe her because she holds something over him. Ian scoffs at her assertion, questioning whether she thinks he's gullible, or if she's simply fooling herself. Sienna shoots back, asking what he's implying now that he's gotten what he wanted. Ian accuses her of immediately accusing him of unfair business practices, as soon as she found out about the collaboration. He labels her naive for jumping to conclusions. Sienna bursts into laughter at Ian's accusation, stating firmly that she's a lawyer, not a cynic. She firmly denies any involvement in the accusations against him, finding the whole idea ridiculous and baseless. If you're eager for the next chapter, drop a comment expressing your interest in a part 2. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated. Until next time, ciao.